Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. In Saskatchewan, the Prince Albert Grand Council is calling for supports from all levels of government to combat a drug crisis in the city of Prince Albert. This follows a report that suggests PA has the highest levels of illicit drugs in its wastewater in the country. As Tamara Pimentel reports, that includes crystal meth.
According to a Statistics Canada study, the city of Prince Albert has the highest amounts of cocaine, meth, and amphetamines in its wastewater compared to other cities across the country. That's per capita. But the Prince Albert Grand Council says this issue goes beyond statistics. It's proof of an ongoing addictions crisis.
There just isn't enough services. Certainly, we are calling for them. There is no medical detox within Indigenous programming.
Joan Breland is the director of the Prince Albert Grand Council Holistic Wellness Centre, which provides substance use prevention using cultural practices. She says those efforts are challenged by the overwhelming demand.
Yes, we have our treatment centers that are full, long wait lists. The demand is so great and there isn't enough services and supports that are there.
In an email, Grand Chief Brian Hardlott says the issue is exacerbated by gang activity. He states in part, while the Prince Albert Police Service is diligently working to counteract the influence of gangs, it's clear that policing alone isn't enough. The Prince Albert Grand Council says it relies on the city's detox program, which is also running out of space, and it calls on governments of all levels to provide more resources.
Everything is just difficult to access and there's no support. We do what we can through prevention, one-to-one, and when it's difficult to cope, the reality for some individuals is just to escape. And we are doing our very best to intervene.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Now, the province of Saskatchewan says their 2023-24 budget includes over $500 million for mental health and addiction services, and more crystal meth treatment programs are being developed. Today, Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew announced the new bill that will recognize Métis leader Louis Riel as the honorary first Premier of Manitoba. Sav Jonza has more from the event.
Today, Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew attempts to right a 153-year-old wrong.
It fills me with a great sense of humility to be able to announce today that our government's first piece of legislation will honor Louis Riel for what he has always been, the first Premier of Manitoba.
The new legislation seeks to recognize Louis Riel as the honorary first Premier of Manitoba. He led the provisional government that brought the province into confederation with the Manitoba Act in 1870. He was then hanged for treason in 1885 for his role in the Red River Resistance and Northwest Rebellion.
And at a very true and fundamental level, Louis Riel is the reason that we are Manitobans. And Louis Riel is the reason that we as Manitobans are also Canadians.
The bill will ask educators to teach of Louis Riel's contributions to the province.
And the reason that we have articulated things in this way is we want to honor Louis Riel's founding role in this province, but we also want future generations to understand that he was not always respected in this way, and that it has taken years of a fight on behalf of Métis people to see him properly respected and represented.
For Manitoba Métis Federation President David Chartrand, irony was not lost that introducing the bill is the province's first Premier of First Nations descent.
Why did it take an Indigenous Premier to do the right thing, to correct the right wrongs of a man that they murdered in this country, a great leader that we all admire today? It took an Indigenous leader to correct that. Why? Is that how far we're still behind regarding how we respect each other as different societies, minorities?
The bill still needs to be put to a vote before it can be official. President Chartrand has a word of warning for anyone who votes against it.
Never forget, if you disrespect our leader that founded this province and got murdered in this country, that fought for his country, that died for his country, and now if you decide to dishonor him again after waiting 153 years, you will have an enemy for the rest of your life. I promise you that.
Sav Jonza, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
The government of Nunavut says there was an above-average amount of sick caribou being reported in western Nunavut. Trevor Wright has those details.
This past fall, the government of Nunavut reported above-average reporting of diseased caribou found in the Kitikmeot and Kivalliq regions. Samples of 3 caribou sent from these 2 regions were sent to the Canadian Wildlife Health Cooperative for testing. Samples from the Kitikmeot were confirmed to have a parasitic disease, which confirmed inflammation and swelling of muscle and connective tissues. Kivalliq samples still await test results. Nunavut Minister of Environment Daniel Kavik at the Legislative Assembly urged hunters to bring in samples should they ever encounter abnormalities in any harvested caribou.
Mr. Speaker, we ask hunters to bring in samples when safe to do so and continue reporting any abnormalities in caribou herds. Only when harvesters, wildlife officers, co-management partners, and biologists work together to monitor the health of caribou herds can we seek effective solutions to improving their long-term health and viability. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Earlier in the season, between September 8 and 19, 7 hunters reported 10 sick caribou from the Kugluktuk Wildlife Office. Samples were subsequently taken by Department of Environment staff. 4 sick caribou were also reported by Rankin Inlet hunters on September 19, according to the minister. Trevor Wright, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
Still in the north, the Beaver River watershed is an area of great importance to the First Nation of Notcho-Nayakdun. The watershed's environment serves as a vital habitat for animals like moose, wolves, and bears. And while a Supreme Court decision from earlier this year seemingly blocked a proposed mineral exploration project from operating the watershed, Yukon government recently appealed that decision. Sarah Connors has more.
On Wednesday, Yukon's Court of Appeal heard arguments on a proposed mining exploration project in the territory's Beaver River watershed. Known as Say Tagay by the First Nation of Notcho-Nayakdun, the area is home to untouched wilderness on their traditional territory. In January, Yukon's Supreme Court ruled in favor of a legal challenge launched by the First Nation. That challenge centered on Yukon government's approval of a proposed exploration project by metallic minerals inside the watershed. In its lawsuit, the First Nation alleged Yukon government failed to properly consult with it about the project. It also argued that the project was approved before land use planning for the watershed was completed. Yukon Supreme Court ultimately found the government failed to properly consult with the First Nation and quashed the approval of the project. During the one-day hearing, Yukon government argued it did consult lawfully and asked for the declaration to reject the project be put aside. Earlier that day, members of the First Nation and environmental advocates rallied outside the courthouse.
This case is about the Beaver River watershed, but it's really about the promise of the final agreements and the say that First Nations are meant to have and that all Yukoners are meant to have in the future of the land.
Yukon's Court of Appeal has reserved its decision. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Thanks, Sarah. The vote for National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations is now less than 2 weeks away. Our Truth in Politics panel is here to talk front-runners and possible outcomes after the break. Welcome back. The vote for National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations is inching closer. Now that we've aired our interviews with all 6 candidates in the fast-approaching election for National Chief, Our Truth in Politics panel is here after a brief hiatus to discuss what happens next. Carrie Benjo is the editor of Eagle Feather News, and Negon Sinclair is a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. Carrie, Negon, good to have you back with us this week. Carrie, let's start with you. What do you think of the current crop of National Chief hopefuls?
I think it's a really good crop to choose from. We have 2 from Saskatchewan, 2 from Manitoba, Alberta, and Ontario. I think that really speaks to the importance that this national chief is going to have within Canada. I think there's a lot of people looking now for very strong leadership coming from the AFN, because I think people are really tired of what transpired over the last couple of years when it came to AFN, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens and who makes it out on top.
Negon, who do you think might be the front runner, or do you have any predictions on who might win?
I think there's 3 main stories that are emerging in this national chief election. The first is how much support is left behind for Reginald Belrose. And I think that coming second to former National Chief Roseanne Archibald, how much support is there left for what has been a pretty good run, a pretty solid run as leader for Belrose, and has a pretty solid platform, but probably the best platform that you're seeing, the most extensive by far, is by David Pratt. So you have to look to his very extensive website and see in the series of interviews that were on this channel, David Pratt was probably the best performer out of all of those videos. And then a close third, I think, is Cindy Woodhouse. Cindy Woodhouse is a block of support from Perry Bellegarde, from being a very close ally with Perry Bellegarde, and in many ways would be a return back to the time of Perry Bellegarde. And of course, Cindy has a lot of good credibility coming out of the CFS negotiations. And so those are the really big 3 big stories. I think the other big story that might be kind of quietly is this might be Sheila North's last opportunity to enter into the field of Indigenous politics in terms of being a chief. I mean, she's run a number of times for Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. She's run notably and done well at the national chief election, but never has been able to quite get over the finish line. And so that will be a story that I think we'll be watching kind of on the side. But I really think it's those 3 candidates who are leading right now. I think Belrose is probably leading with Pratt and Woodhouse right behind.
Carrie, you spoke about how important you think this election is, and that others do as well. But how effective would you say the AFN has been over the last few decades, though?
I think for me, like, one of the biggest things that has stood out over the history has been the work AFN has done in terms of the residential school file. They were able to negotiate a deal. They got the apology. And I think that was like the pinnacle of what is possible if everybody works together. There can be significant action, significant change that can come from the AFN, and they can speak on behalf of all Indigenous people within Canada. And I think that's been lost over the last number of years, of the amount of power and the strength of their voice, that the potential strength of their voice that they do have. I think I'm really hopeful that they will regain that, because they've lost a lot of footing over the last number of years. I think since the whole residential school file has kind of made its way through the years, and I'm really looking forward to what big issue they're going to tackle, because there are so many right now, and I think the AFN really needs to step up and become that voice and become really strong leaders within to represent First Nations people.
Negon, what do you see as the big issues for whoever is elected national chief? There's been the internal, politics at the AFN, but we're also looking, on a federal level. There could be an election and a change in government there if the current polls are to believed. What do you think the job ahead is for whoever becomes national chief?
Well, of the published platforms, and only 3 of the 6 candidates have a real extensively published platform, everyone is talking about the revamping of the charter of the AFN. In fact, one candidate, Craig McEnroe, is even running for a kind of redundancy of the national chief position to only have the chief speak to the federal government. So it kind of makes the national chief position almost irrelevant, or maybe an intermediary in some way. And so everyone's talking about the charter of the AFN, revamping the charter. And that's the things that Kerry's speaking about in terms of revamping the kind of internal workings of the AFN. Everybody has their own particular issues. Like, for instance, Sheila North is talking about suicide and addictions. Cindy Woodhouse is talking about CFS and policing. David Pratt's talking a lot about health and about communications between the chiefs. But the real big ticket item, I think, will be on the self-sufficiency of the AFN. That's something that really hasn't come up, because the problem with the AFN, of course, is something Reginald Belrose spent a great deal of time talking about in the interview with you, is the fact that the AFN has entered a kind of critical phase, a kind of emergency phase in terms of funding. And as a result, the organization has really been hampered, and it's a large part due to some of the scandals that have taken place. And the question is will the AFN ever be a economically self-sufficient model? Up to this point, there really is no candidate that's been able to suggest one. And will that come out in this election? Well, it hasn't in the past, but let's hope that there's change coming in the future.
Kerry Negon, only a couple of weeks to go before the vote. Great to talk with you about this.
Yeah.
And you can watch our interviews with all 6 of the candidates running for National Chief over on our APTN News YouTube page. Still to come, people across Turtle Island are mourning the loss of a bridge builder. Stick around. Welcome back. Time now to take a look at our photo of the day. That time of year is getting closer and closer. Some ice fishing. Joan sent in this great shot. Not sure where they were out, but remember to check those ice conditions before you head out there. Great shot. Thanks, Joan. Your photos can be sent to share at aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at Friday's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 5 above in Halifax, snow, and 3 in Charlottetown. -12 in Kuujjuaq, snow, and 4 below for Nain. +1 in Montreal, 12 below in Val-d'Or. +1 with snow in Sault Ste. Marie, 9 below in North Bay. -2 and sunny in Thunder Bay, sun's out, and 5 below in Sioux Lookout. -1 in God's Lake and the Paw, 0 for Norway House. -2 and sunny skies for Winnipeg, 3 below under the sun in Dauphin. -4 and sunny in Regina, 0 for Saskatoon. +1 in Meadow Lake, 0 with snow for Buffalo Narrows. In northern Alberta, sunny and 1 for High Level, 6 above in Grand Prairie. +3 in Edmonton, sun's out, and 0 for Lethbridge. 7 above and sunny skies in Vancouver, +8 in Victoria. 0 in Prince George, 2 in Smithers. -20 with snow in Old Crow, +2 for Whitehorse. -4 and snow in Yellowknife, 5 below with flurries in Norman Wells. -16 in Sax Harbor, 19 below for Paulatuck. -14 in Chesterfield, 17 below in Whale Cove. -23 with snow in Resolute, -13 and flurries in Arctic Bay. Okay, time to head over to our Ottawa studio now. That's where Fraser Needham is standing by with a look at tonight's Nation to Nation.
Coming up on Nation to Nation, we'll talk to the manager of an Indigenous housing organization about the government's plan for affordable housing. We'll also talk to my colleague Kathleen Martins about how an Assembly of First Nations report has found its way into a civil court case in Manitoba. We'll also talk to NDP MP Laurie Edlout about the challenges of flying in and out of Nunavut. All this ahead on tonight's episode of Nation to Nation.
Fraser better head on over to the desk. He's on air in about 4 minutes. Well, APTN Investigates returns tomorrow night with an all-new episode. There's a new Canada Water Act in the works, and the Trudeau government says Indigenous rights will be respected. Investigative journalist Christopher Reed takes a look at what that might mean for communities where clean water has been something they've had to fight for. Here's a preview for Liquid Law.
There are many stories of what can happen to Indigenous communities and their water and land when hydro projects come. And one of those stories is happening right now at Split Lake, Manitoba, the home of Titasqueyak Cree Nation and Robert Spence.
My name is Robert Spence. I'm from Titasqueyak. I was a former counselor for the community at one time for 6 years, and before that I was a commercial fisherman, hunter, trapper, artist, father, and a grandfather. I've been advocating for going on probably 30 years now, 20, 30 years, on the Churchill River. And the Churchill River sturgeon are in danger of going extinct because there's only one remnant population left on the whole Churchill River from Missy Falls control structure to the coast of the Hudson's Bay. That's a 450-kilometer stretch of water that used to be a healthy, teeming river full of life. It is now just a chain of dry lakes connected by a stream.
You can catch the rest of APTN Investigates Liquid Law tomorrow night, immediately following the APTN National News. Pillar, bridge builder, and activist. Those are just a few of the words that describe Linda Kiisk, who passed away earlier this week from a heart attack. People across the country are mourning the 58-year-old Anishinaabe woman. Kiisk was a 60s scoop survivor. She was raised in Ottawa and was well known for the work she did towards reconciliation. She founded the Flotilla of Friendship, an annual canoeing event you probably see here that brought together police officers and Indigenous youth for a day. She co-organized one of the largest Indigenous rallies in Ottawa, Idle No More. In 2022, she was honored with a Citizens Award for her advocacy work by the Ottawa Police. Kiisk touched the hearts of everyone with her kindness, laughter, and giving spirit. Soar high. Well, that is all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Thursday. For much more, you can head on over to our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward, Marcy Miigwech. Thanks for being with us tonight. Stick around. Nation to Nation is up next. Hopefully Fraser makes it to the desk in time. Have a great night.